February 2nd, 1940, 21:30 hours, Northern Karelia, Eastern Front. A bitter wind clawed through the skeletal birches, carrying the distant howls of wolves across the frozen expanse. Snow blanketed the world, unbroken except for faint ski tracks that vanished into the black horizon. You can almost feel the cold sinking through layers of wool and leather, numbing fingers and toes as each breath erupts in icy clouds. Lieutenant Mikhail Ivanovich crouched behind a ridge, his eyes narrowing at the faint glimmer of German campfires far below. Around him, 5 men shifted silently, ski poles adjusted, rifles snugged against their shoulders, every muscle tensed, every ear strained. The night was alive with possibility. The Germans thought this sector was quiet. Just a few skiing nuisances, their intelligence had reported, laughable, dismissible. Ivanovich knew the truth. They were small, yes, no artillery, no tanks, but they had the advantage of the night, the snow, and their own discipline. Each step was deliberate, calculated. One misstep could send a shower of frost into the air, revealing their positions. He raised a gloved hand. Silence. The squad melted into the white shadows, approaching a supply depot that German soldiers guarded with lazy confidence. The men could see the flicker of oil lamps, hear the murmur of voices and the clink of metal. Guards were relaxed, joking over brandy, oblivious to the danger crawling toward them. One by one, the Soviet soldiers set small charges along the depot's perimeter, charges so precise they were nearly invisible. Ivanovich's eyes reflected the faint glow as he pressed the detonator. A muffled explosion whispered through the snow. A German soldier shouted. Another ran toward the flames. Confusion spread like wildfire. The patrol advanced, moving from one target to the next. Ammunition caches, communications tents, small artillery crews. Each strike was surgical. No one could see them. Only fleeting shadows, like ghosts slipping over the snow. Panic and disbelief rippled through the German lines as their supplies vanished in minutes, their positions compromised before any organized response could form. And then Ivanovich paused. A faint sound, too regular, too deliberate, cut through the wind. Had the Germans noticed them already, or was it something else entirely? By 22:15 hours, the forest was alive with whispers of destruction. The snow, which had been a silent blanket, now carried the echoes of sudden chaos. Small fires flickered across the German supply depot, the orange glow licking the white expanse before disappearing into the shadows. Smoke curled and twisted, thin yet ominous, merging with the black canopy of pines overhead. You can almost hear it, the sharp hiss of burning ammunition, the muffled metallic crashes of supplies toppling, the frantic footsteps of soldiers slipping across frozen ground. Lieutenant Mikhail Ivanovich crouched behind a snow-draped ridge, scanning the chaos below. His breath steamed in the bitter air, each exhale a ghostly plume disappearing into the night. Around him, his squad of 6 moved like specters, rifles close, ski poles ready, bodies low. The Germans, stationed across the tree line in what they believed was a quiet sector, were entirely unaware of the danger closing in on them. Intelligence reports had dismissed Soviet ski patrols as ineffective nuisances, harmless shadows to be ignored. Tonight, that assumption would cost them dearly. Ivanovich signaled to split the squad into 2 precise groups. One team would intercept retreating supply carts carrying critical provisions. The other would take out the artillery crew stationed on the ridge, responsible for covering the depot's perimeter. Each step, each movement, was deliberate, choreographed to the rhythm of stealth. The slightest crunch of snow under a boot could betray them, alerting the Germans and turning this calculated strike into a death trap. Private Sergei Petrov, the youngest of the patrol, tugged a bundle of explosives behind a fallen log. His teeth chattered, not from fear, but from the cold gnawing into his jaw. His gloved fingers trembled slightly as he checked the detonator wires, ensuring they were secure. A shadow shifted near the edge of the depot, a German sentry returning from his patrol earlier than expected. Petrov froze, heart hammering against his chest. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Any wrong move, any slight noise, would give them away. Ivanovich leaned close and whispered, "Wait, let him pass." Petrov's muscles locked. The sentry shuffled past, oblivious to the danger mere meters away. It was a silent victory, an adrenaline-charged reassurance that skill and patience would win over brute force. Meanwhile, Sergeant Anton Volkov was positioned higher, behind a ridge snowbank, eyes fixed on the 75 artillery crew. The Germans were laughing, tossing cigarettes and joking about the supposed harmless Soviet patrols. Their confidence was absolute, their laughter naive, and it made Volkov's fingers tighten around his rifle with a mixture of anticipation and grim resolve. He counted silently, 1, 2, 3, and then launched a grenade with perfect precision. It landed amidst the artillery crew. The night erupted. Fire, smoke, shouting, the metallic screech of falling shells, and the chaos of men trying to flee. The two groups converged with quiet precision near the supply lines, where wagons stacked with provisions had been left exposed. Horses bolted in terror, spooked by sudden explosions. Wagons overturned, ammunition boxes ignited, and the sound of cracking gunpowder filled the freezing air. The Germans scrambled, shouting orders, trying to locate the attackers who moved like ghosts through the darkness. Every shadow was suspect. Every gust of wind seemed alive. Officers barked commands, but their voices carried only confusion. Nothing could prepare them for the efficiency of a handful of Soviet ski soldiers operating under the cover of night and snow. Yet Ivanovich knew the mission was far from complete. Beyond the depot, German reinforcements could appear at any moment. The patrol's ultimate objective remained, a communications tent perched at the edge of the tree line, where messages were being relayed back to headquarters. Disrupting that flow could create a ripple effect across the sector, paralyzing command for hours. The squad approached cautiously. The snow muffled their skis and boots, but Ivanovich could see movement, a patrol returning early from their rounds heading directly toward them. Too close to retreat, too exposed to fight. He whispered instructions quickly, improvising with signals honed from months of training. The men melted behind snowbanks and trees, their breaths shallow, hearts pounding. They waited. The German patrol drew nearer, oblivious, chatting among themselves. Volkov's hand hovered over a small improvised spike mine hidden under the snow. One misstep could trigger it too early, revealing their position. And then it happened, a distant shot rang out, not from them, but from a nervous German sentry reacting to the fires below. The sound was amplified in the stillness of the forest. For a heartbeat, time seemed suspended. Ivanovich's men froze, each second stretching like an eternity. If discovered now, all would be lost. Then just as tension peaked, the patrol passed. Silent signals passed between the squad. Every man exhaled softly, almost imperceptibly, releasing the tension coiled tightly within. They had avoided detection again, but the night was still alive with danger. Fires still burned. Ammunition still exploded. And somewhere in the shadows, the main communications hub waited to be neutralized. Ivanovich's eyes swept the ridge. He could feel the night pressing down, the wind carrying the scent of smoke and pine, the faint tang of fear. Each step forward would demand more courage, more precision, more cunning. And somewhere deep in the forest, he knew the Germans were beginning to sense something, a presence they could not see, yet could feel. A silent, deadly presence. A sudden gust of wind carried a metallic clatter from the ridge above. Did one of his men misstep, or had the Germans finally noticed? Ivanovich's hand tightened around his rifle. Every heartbeat, every breath, every crunch of snow mattered. The final strike, the communications tent, was only moments away, and one mistake could turn the night from triumph into disaster. 23:00 hours. The snow had thickened, blanketing the world in an almost unnatural silence. Only the occasional crack of a splintered crate or a distant German curse broke the quiet. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that something extraordinary was unfolding within its icy veins. You can almost feel it, the weight of snow on your shoulders, the icy sting on your cheeks, the tension that makes every snap of a twig feel like a gunshot. Lieutenant Mikhail Ivanovich led his squad down a narrow ravine, hidden from the view of German patrols and watchtowers. Their destination, a small communications hub, a wooden cabin fortified with sandbags, where encrypted messages were being relayed to headquarters. If the patrol succeeded in silencing it, the Germans would lose their coordination for hours, maybe longer. Private Sergei Petrov moved silently, balancing on his skis as if the snow itself were water. His fingers were numb, but he ignored the cold, focusing on the faint glow from the cabin windows. Every shadow seemed alive, every flicker suspicious. The patrol had crossed open fields before, but here the forest narrowed, the branches thick with snow, forming a natural corridor of cover and danger. Suddenly, Sergeant Anton Volkov raised a hand, halting the squad. Ahead, 2 German soldiers emerged from behind a tree, weapons slung casually, laughing about the fires and chaos below. They were close, too close. One step, one noise, and the element of surprise would vanish. Ivanovich's mind raced. Every tactic he had learned, every drill rehearsed countless times, now mattered more than ever. He whispered an order. Volkov and Petrov fanned out to flank the approaching Germans, using the trees as shields. Another soldier, Corporal Dmitry Orlov, crept behind, carrying a small satchel of explosives for the cabin. The Germans laughed again, unaware that shadows were already moving around them. Ivanovich counted down silently, 3, 2, 1. A precise volley of shots rang out. The first German hit the snow, stunned. The second turned, eyes wide with disbelief, but it was too late. The squad converged, neutralizing the patrol before alarms could be raised. Their bodies dropped silently into the snow. No cries, no struggle, just the cold night reclaiming them. The way now clear, Ivanovich signaled to approach the cabin. Petrov set the charges carefully, placing them where the structural beams would amplify the blast without compromising the squad's cover. The smell of pine and smoke mixed with the acrid tang of explosives as the fuse was lit. And then silence. The seconds dragged, hearts pounding, waiting for the inevitable. A soft thump, then a sudden roar of splintering wood, followed by a cascade of debris and shattered glass. Sparks and smoke burst into the night. Inside, German operators scrambled, disoriented, trying to recover equipment and papers. They could hear nothing beyond the chaos, no shots, no commands, only the cold wind and the distant explosions of the supply depots. The patrol didn't linger. Ivanovich led his men back through the forest, tracing their route along hidden tracks. Yet the night was far from over. Reinforcements from nearby outposts were already on alert, alerted by fires, gunfire, and the silence that now hung over the sector. Each step required vigilance. Every shadow could hide a German patrol, every sound a potential threat. As dawn approached, the squad paused at a ridge overlooking the once bustling German sector. Smoke still drifted from smoldering depots, wagons lay overturned, horses gone, artillery crews missing. Not a single German had spotted them in action. Their presence was a ghost in the snow, a phantom strike that left devastation in its wake. But Ivanovich knew the danger wasn't gone. Somewhere, alarms had sounded. Somewhere, German officers were piecing together the puzzle. And somewhere, an officer was realizing that a small patrol, dismissed as useless, had just rewritten the map of their entire sector. The squad skied onward, leaving behind a tableau of chaos and disbelief, their breaths mingling with the cold morning air. And somewhere in the distance, a faint, metallic sound carried through the snow, a sound that suggested the Germans were beginning to search. The night's work had succeeded, but how long could they remain unseen? 03:45 hours. The first pale light of dawn began seeping through the dense pines of Karelia. The forest, once black and unyielding, now glimmered with frost, each branch heavy with snow. You can almost feel the crispness in the air, the biting chill that cuts through even the thickest winter clothing. The landscape was eerily quiet, almost expectant, as if nature itself paused to witness the aftermath of a night unlike any the sector had seen before. Lieutenant Mikhail Ivanovich led his squad to a high ridge overlooking the German lines. Below, the devastation of the patrol's work was clear. Supply depots burned, wagons overturned, artillery crews absent or scrambling to regroup. Smoke curled into the morning sky, creating a surreal, ghostly tableau. The German soldiers who had mocked the useless ski patrol hours ago now stared at the destruction with wide-eyed disbelief. Some froze mid-step, unable to process how a handful of enemy soldiers had wrought such chaos. Others tried to regroup, shouting orders that carried only confusion. Ivanovich's squad moved cautiously along a ridge line, scanning for late-arriving reinforcements. Their skis crunched faintly on the snow, but the sound was swallowed by the vast emptiness of the forest. Each man's face bore the exhaustion of exertion, the frostbite of the night, and the adrenaline-fueled focus that had kept them alive. You can almost feel the tension, the unrelenting pace of survival, the thrill of victory, and the constant, gnawing fear of detection. As they approached a narrow pass leading back to Soviet lines, they spotted their first German reconnaissance patrol since the night's operation. Two soldiers, moving cautiously along a frozen trail, were searching for signs of the attackers. Volkov, ever vigilant, signaled for silence. The patrol melted into the snowdrifts, unseen, as the Germans passed mere meters away. One wrong move and their cover would be blown. Meanwhile below, German officers convened in a frantic attempt to understand what had occurred. Captain Karl-Heinz Müller of the 98th Infantry Regiment scrawled reports, his hands trembling slightly. "Impossible," he muttered. "How could a patrol so small, so insignificant cause such havoc?" Others murmured similar disbelief. The night had shattered their confidence. Every assumption, every plan predicated on their superiority in numbers and firepower now seemed tenuous. Back with Ivanovich's patrol, Private Petrov paused to adjust his pack, noticing the faint glow of a distant watchtower. Through binoculars, they could see a lone German sentinel scanning the horizon, oblivious to the fact that the very sector he patrolled had been rendered nearly defenseless hours ago. Ivanovich signaled for a slow, silent retreat. Every step had to be deliberate. They could not afford to be captured now, not when the night had already delivered such a decisive blow. As the squad moved through the frost-laden forest, Ivanovich allowed himself a rare glance back. Flames still flickered where supply depots had burned. Smoke rose like ghostly fingers against the pale sky, and in that moment he understood the magnitude of what they had accomplished. A sector immobilized, a German command left scrambling, and a message sent that underestimated foes are often the deadliest. Yet the patrol's work was not entirely finished. Somewhere, the Germans were regrouping. Somewhere, reinforcements would arrive. And somewhere, the echo of their night's actions would ripple further than even Ivanovich could anticipate. The squad pressed forward, skis cutting silent arcs through the snow, leaving behind a forest alive with smoke, chaos, and disbelief. The winter dawn carried with it a chilling realization. The so-called useless ski patrol had become a phantom force, rewriting the rules of engagement for that sector. But as Ivanovich glanced at the horizon, he noticed something that made his stomach tighten, a faint column of movement emerging from the east, soldiers moving cautiously through the snow, heading directly toward the devastated depots. The Germans had begun their counter-search. Could they escape unseen this time? 0430 hours. The cold had intensified as the sun struggled to break through thick, low-hanging clouds. Each breath of Lieutenant Mikhail Ivanovich and his squad emerged as a visible mist, merging with the lingering smoke from the night's fires. The forest, once their ally, now seemed tense, almost alive, as if aware that the hunters had become legends in the darkness. You can almost feel it, the crunch of snow underfoot, the biting wind cutting through layers of wool, the sharp scent of gunpowder and burning timber lingering like a ghost across the ridge. Ivanovich signaled a brief halt. The squad crouched low, scanning the distant treeline where faint figures moved. German reinforcements had begun to fan out, searching systematically for signs of the mysterious attackers. The patrol had done their damage, but now the hunters could easily become the hunted. Every shadow could conceal a rifle barrel, every sound could betray their position. Sergeant Anton Volkov, always hyper-aware, whispered, "They're coming from the east," slow, methodical. His eyes narrowed, catching the subtle movements of German uniforms against the snow. The squad's hearts raced, not from exertion, but from the delicate balance of life and death that now hung in the air. One wrong step, one snap of a branch, and the Germans would know exactly where they were. Yet Ivanovich's focus remained on the forest's edge, on the network of trails and frozen streams that offered escape routes. Each man had memorized these paths for months. They had trained for stealth, for endurance, for survival in this unforgiving winter landscape. Tonight, that training had been tested to its limits. The fires and chaos they had caused, burning depots, destroyed supply wagons, scattered artillery crews, had left a wake of terror, but survival demanded more than destruction. It demanded cunning. Private Sergei Petrov stumbled slightly, the cold sapping strength from his legs, and a murmur of concern passed through the squad. Ivanovich quickly knelt beside him, offering a quiet word of encouragement, a reminder that every soldier had a role, that every step counted. They were not just attacking, they were existing in a world that punished mistakes brutally. Suddenly, a distant gunshot cracked through the icy air, not aimed at them, but close enough to send a shiver through the patrol. They froze, listening. Another shot followed, and then the unmistakable shouts of men searching the forest. The Germans were beginning to piece together the devastation, beginning to suspect that a small, disciplined unit was responsible. The realization of being hunted sent an extra pulse of adrenaline through the patrol. Ivanovich whispered orders, directing his men to split briefly, taking advantage of snowbanks, fallen trees, and the natural contours of the land. Each movement was precise, silent, rehearsed to perfection. They were shadows in the snow, almost intangible, yet lethal in their presence. Every second counted. Every heartbeat mattered. As they moved along a hidden ridge, Ivanovich allowed himself a brief glance behind. The German sector, once orderly and imposing, was now a landscape of confusion. Fires still smoldered, black smoke curling against the pale morning sky. The soldiers who had mocked them hours ago were scrambling, their confidence shattered, their belief in invincibility eroded by the ghosts of the night. But the patrol's danger was far from over. Ivanovich knew that if they were caught, the story of the useless ski patrol would end in tragedy rather than legend. The reinforcements from neighboring outposts were methodically sweeping the forest, their search patterns precise and unforgiving. Every step the Soviet soldiers took now carried the weight of life and death. A sudden movement caught Petrov's eye, a faint shimmer of a uniform in the distance, not a patrol, but perhaps a lone sentry moving back to investigate the fires. The squad froze. Ivanovich signaled for silence, his hand barely moving in the cold. They waited, breath caught, seconds stretched interminably. The sentry passed, oblivious, and vanished into the snow-laden trees. Relief was fleeting. Every man knew that the Germans would not give up. They would adapt, regroup, and search until the mysterious strike was understood. Yet despite the danger, there was a sense of quiet triumph, a realization that they had achieved something extraordinary. A handful of soldiers had struck fear into a well-equipped army, reshaping a sector of the front in one night. Ivanovich glanced at the horizon, the first weak rays of sunlight touching the treetops. Smoke still rose from the destroyed depots, curling like spectral fingers into the cold air. Below, the Germans were starting to understand the magnitude of their losses. For hours, they would be paralyzed, unsure of how such a small patrol could leave such devastation. But the forest still held secrets, and the patrol still had one final obstacle before returning to safety. A frozen river blocked the most direct route back, its surface brittle and treacherous. Ivanovich's men had to cross it, unseen, unheard, or risk being trapped between the pursuing Germans and the icy expanse. Every step on the fragile ice could be their last. The squad paused at the riverbank, staring at the shimmering surface below. The cold seeped into their bones, the adrenaline fading slowly into exhaustion. And yet, there was no turning back. Ahead lay survival, and perhaps a story that would echo far beyond the snow-laden forests of Karelia. 05:15 hours. The first light of morning barely touched the horizon, casting a pale, cold glow over the frozen Karelia landscape. The world seemed suspended in grey and white, a stark canvas broken only by the black silhouettes of trees and the distant smoke rising from destroyed depots. You can almost feel the frost biting through layers of wool, the icy wind sneaking through cuffs and collars, the numb ache in your fingers and toes that makes every movement a challenge. Lieutenant Mikhail Ivanovich's patrol reached the frozen river that now lay before them like a perilous mirror. Ice stretched across its width, thin in places, groaning ominously under its own weight. One wrong step could shatter the surface, plunging a soldier into freezing water and ending the night's triumph in seconds. The squad crouched behind snowdrifts at the bank, scanning for any movement from German reinforcements who might be patrolling the far shore. Ivanovich knelt beside Private Petrov, inspecting the surface. "Step lightly, test each board with your pole," he whispered. The tension in his voice mirrored the tension in the air. Every man understood the stakes, not just the ice, but the forest beyond, where the Germans were actively searching. One misstep now, and the patrol's carefully executed operation would end in disaster. The first man, Corporal Dmitry Orlov, carefully tested the ice with his ski pole, listening for cracks. a faint creak. He shifted his weight gradually, sliding forward until the pole felt secure. Then he motioned for the next man. One by one, they began crossing, their skis gliding silently, bodies low, rifles pressed against their shoulders. The frozen river became a gauntlet, a strip of danger that tested nerves, balance, and focus simultaneously. Below the treeline, faint movement caught Ivanovich's sharp eyes. German reinforcements were advancing from the east, moving methodically, sweeping the forest with practiced precision. The squad's breath caught. Every man froze for a moment, hearts hammering, knowing that discovery here meant certain death. Ivanovich signaled for silence, pressing a gloved finger to his lips. They waited. The Germans moved past, oblivious to the shadows sliding across the ice. Once across, the patrol melted into the snow-covered underbrush, their skis leaving only faint traces quickly obscured by drifting snow. The forest around them was silent again, almost reverent. The destruction of the night had left its mark, burned depots, overturned wagons, scattered artillery, but the real danger had never ceased. The Germans were aware now that something extraordinary had occurred, and they would not rest until it was fully understood. As they moved, Petrov whispered, "Lieutenant, did they even see us?" His voice was hoarse from cold and exertion. Ivanovich shook his head. "Not yet, but they will realize soon enough, and it won't matter. Our work is done." His words were steady, but his eyes scanned every shadow, anticipating the next threat. The squad pressed on through the dense forest, moving toward the safe lines beyond the front. The snow crunched beneath their skis, echoing faintly in the still morning. Ivanovich's mind raced, replaying the events of the night, the precise strikes, the chaos, the fires, the unbroken silence of their approach and retreat. He knew the Germans would eventually piece together the devastation, but the squad had done more than destroy supplies. They had delivered a psychological blow, a message of vulnerability to an overconfident enemy. A sudden crack rang out behind them, a tree branch snapping under the weight of snow, or perhaps a German patrol closing in. Instinctively, Ivanovich signaled for halt. The squad pressed low, rifles ready, eyes scanning every flicker of movement. For a moment, nothing. Then a gust of wind shifted, carrying the smell of smoke and burning timber downstream, mingling with the icy scent of the river. The forest seemed to hold its breath again. The patrol moved again, slower now, methodically. Every step was measured, every sound minimized. The ridge ahead offered cover and a vantage point. Ivanovich glanced at his men, Volkov, Orlov, Petrov. They were exhausted, frostbitten, yet alive. Their expressions reflected relief and awe, and perhaps the faint pride of knowing they had changed the map of the front in one night. But even in that quiet triumph, Ivanovich sensed the lingering danger. The Germans would not give up easily. The forest still held hidden eyes, and somewhere, officers were plotting retaliation. Yet for now, the ski patrol had become legends in their own right, the useless patrol that had turned disbelief into devastation, fear into a lesson the Germans would not forget. As the squad finally reached the relative safety of tree-covered ridges leading back to Soviet lines, Ivanovich allowed himself a brief moment to look back. Smoke still rose, wagons lay in ruin, artillery crews were scattered. The night had been theirs, but in the distance, faint glimmers of movement hinted that the Germans were only beginning to understand the magnitude of what had occurred. And the memory of this night, the fire, the chaos, the phantom presence, would haunt them for weeks to come. 06:30 hours. Morning had fully broken over the snow-laden forests of Karelia. Pale sunlight reflected off the icy branches, casting fractured shadows across the landscape. You can almost feel the crisp, biting air, the frost seeping into every layer of clothing, the weariness in muscles that have moved through snow for hours. The night was over, but its echoes lingered. Smoke spiraled slowly from the destroyed depots, curling into the sky like spectral fingers, a silent testament to the havoc wrought by a handful of soldiers. Lieutenant Mikhail Ivanovich and his patrol paused at a ridge overlooking the German sector one final time. Below, the chaos of the previous hours remained frozen in time: overturned wagons, burned supply depots, abandoned equipment, and scattered artillery. German soldiers were moving cautiously now, eyes wide, voices hushed as officers tried to piece together the night's mystery. Their disbelief was palpable. They had laughed at these ski troops hours ago, only to find themselves outmatched, outmaneuvered, and utterly exposed. Ivanovich's squad exhaled slowly, the tension finally leaving their bodies in visible clouds of breath. Private Sergei Petrov lowered his rifle, shaking slightly from the cold and the adrenaline. "Lieutenant, we did it," he whispered, as though afraid to voice the triumph aloud. Ivanovich nodded, a rare, brief smile touching his frost-chapped lips. "We did, but this is only one night. They will search, they will adapt, and we must disappear before they discover us." The patrol moved toward the forest's edge, navigating carefully over hidden ice patches and through thick underbrush. The forest was eerily quiet, the silence amplified by the destruction below. Every sound, the snapping of a twig, the crunch of snow under a ski, felt amplified, reminding them that danger still lurked nearby. Yet each step they took also reinforced the magnitude of their achievement. The sector they had struck was now effectively paralyzed. Communications were disrupted, supplies destroyed, and artillery crews neutralized. Back at German command posts, officers scrawled reports, their hands shaking with disbelief. Captain Karl-Heinz Müller of the 98th Infantry Regiment stared at maps, trying to calculate how such a small force could inflict so much damage. "Impossible," he muttered again. Others murmured in agreement. Rumors began to spread among the troops below, shadows in the night, a ghost patrol that moved like the wind. The psychological impact was as significant as the material destruction. Meanwhile, Ivanovich's patrol reached a hidden ravine, finally safe from the main sweep of German forces. They paused to remove snow from their rifles, adjust boots, and check one another for frostbite. Even in these quiet moments, their minds raced. The night had been a success, but survival demanded constant vigilance. A single misstep now, and the Germans could still catch them. Lieutenant Ivanovich allowed himself a rare reflection. The useless ski patrol, dismissed and mocked, had changed the narrative of this sector. They had transformed disbelief into awe, arrogance into vulnerability. Their success had not come from numbers or firepower, but from discipline, courage, and intimate knowledge of the frozen terrain. Yet even in triumph, Ivanovich sensed the lingering tension. Somewhere in the forest, German reinforcements would continue their search. Somewhere, officers would puzzle over the night's events, struggling to reconcile the reality with what they had believed possible. And somewhere, the memory of this night would shape tactics, influence morale, and become legend among both sides of the front. The patrol moved further into cover, disappearing into the dense forest. Their skis glided silently over untouched snow, leaving only faint tracks soon to be obscured by the wind. Each man's face reflected exhaustion, pride, and the weight of what they had accomplished. The snow patrol, once laughed at and dismissed, had left a scar on the German forces that would not be forgotten. As the squad finally vanished from view, Ivanovich glanced one last time at the smoldering sector below. Smoke still rose, fires smoldered, and the forest carried the scent of disruption. The night's operation had rewritten the rules of engagement for this sector, and for the German troops who had mocked them, disbelief had turned into a harsh, unforgettable lesson. Even the smallest, most overlooked force can wield extraordinary power when courage, strategy, and the frozen night converge.